Chapter 8, The False God. Imagine waking up in a village where the snow has stopped falling, the sun is shining, and you realize that's when the real nightmare begins. Because in this place, good weather doesn't mean safety, it means someone is about to die. And the question isn't if you'll survive. It's who you're willing to sacrifice to make sure you do. The deceptive morning. It had been a long time, perhaps weeks, perhaps an eternity compressed into days, since Lin Qiushi had seen weather this forgiving. The wind, which had howled through the night like something wounded and vengeful, had finally died. The snow, relentless and suffocating for so long, had stopped its descent. And now, a thin, careful sun hung low and gentle in a sky the color of old porcelain, giving the world the illusion that last night's horrors were nothing but fever dreams, nightmares that dissolved in daylight. But Lin knew better. The morning wanted to be kind, wanted to offer comfort, wanted to pretend, but beneath that fragile veneer of normalcy, something fundamental had shifted. The village had shown its teeth. And once you've seen the monster's true face, no amount of sunshine can make you forget. He lingered in bed longer than usual with Ruan Baijie, neither of them eager to face what the day would bring. They let conversation meander from classical poetry to petty philosophy, from mundane observations about the quality of the bedding to half-formed theories about what governed this cursed place. It was the kind of small talk people use like mortar, trying desperately to fill the cracks in their composure, to iron out the chill that had settled deep in their chests and refused to leave. Ruan spoke about a Tang dynasty poem she'd memorized as a child, something about mountains and mist and solitude. Her voice was steady, almost hypnotic, and Lin let himself be carried by it, grateful for anything that wasn't screaming or the wet sound of something dying in the dark. But hunger, that most basic and undeniable need, eventually drove them up and out of their temporary sanctuary. The kitchen conference. In the kitchen, people had already gathered, a dozen faces that looked paler than the anemic light filtering through the frost-etched windows. They clustered in small groups, talking in low, clipped voices about what came next, about going to see the carpenter later, about the things they'd witnessed and couldn't unsee. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken dread. People moved carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile peace they'd managed to construct overnight. Eyes darted to corners, to doorways, to the shadows that lingered even in lamplight. Xiong Qi spotted Lin first and greeted him with a nod that was almost normal, almost friendly. He immediately asked about Ruan. Where was she all right, had she made it through the night unscathed? Lin kept his answer simple, rehearsed. She'd stayed in bed complaining about the cold, he'd go bring her food. It was easier than explaining how they'd both lain awake for hours, listening to every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the shutters, waiting for something to come through the walls. Xiong nodded, seeming to accept the explanation at face value, and said they planned to go see the carpenter soon, that Lin should come too. In any normal time, in any normal place, the suggestion might have been casual, even teasing. Come on, don't be antisocial, join the group. But after what had happened, after two people had vanished into the shrine and never returned, it felt like one more fragile obligation, another thread in a web of survival that bound them all together whether they wanted it or not. The journey to truth. They were going to ask about filling the wells. Lin had noticed it before, nearly every household in this village had a well positioned in the center of the courtyard. An odd placement. An odd custom. Wells were usually dug near kitchens or at the periphery of property, some were practical, some were convenient. But here, they occupied the ceremonial heart of each home, like altars or focal points of some architecture he didn't understand. Last night's deaths had been blamed, at least in part, on the carpenter's misleading instructions, or what people interpreted as misleading. The specifics were fuzzy, distorted by fear and exhaustion, but the outline was clear enough. Two people had gone into the shrine alone, following what they thought was proper procedure. They hadn't come back. Their screams had, though. Those had carried quite well through the thin walls and the cold air. So the mood toward the carpenter, when they finally found him in his workshop surrounded by wood shavings and the sweet smell of sawdust, was far from friendly. Even easygoing Xiong, who usually deflected tension with jokes and easy smiles, looked grim. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. The carpenter sat in his usual spot, pipe in hand, the same half-closed eyes that made him look either supremely relaxed or utterly indifferent to the chaos his village had unleashed on them. He was slow to speak, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably long, letting them squirm. After the worship, he said finally, when someone asked plainly about the next steps, "You have to fill the well. Pick a night. Put the dead thing down in the well, cover it with dirt, and a coffin will be made." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Dead thing?" Xiao Ke's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "What do you mean by that?" The carpenter didn't blink, didn't soften it. He said it plainly, with the inflection you'd use to describe fixing a leaky roof, exactly what I said. "A dead thing. Anything that's dead?" Xiong asked, and Lin could hear the desperate hope in his voice, the search for a practical loophole, some technicality that would make this less grotesque than it sounded. "As long as it's dead," the carpenter confirmed, taking a long draw from his pipe. Smoke curled from his nostrils like dragon's breath. "Chicken, duck, dog, whatever you can find. Put it in within 3 days, cover it with dirt, and I can start the coffin." The horrible realization. The words landed like cold water thrown in their faces. For a moment, just a fleeting, precious moment, relief flickered on Xiong's face. Animals. Just animals. They could manage that. Find a stray dog, a wild bird, something, anything. Until Yuan Baijia's flat, emotionless observation pushed that relief away like opening a door to winter wind. "There aren't any living animals in the village," she said. The statement was simple. Factual. Devastating. Yuan continued, her voice taking on that analytical quality Lin had learned meant she was working through a problem she'd already mostly solved. "Think about what we've been eating. The food that appears. Someone added eggs to our basket yesterday morning, but nobody's seen a chicken. Not one. Not anywhere." Lin felt his stomach turn, felt the breakfast he'd eaten earlier threatening to make a reappearance. "So where did those eggs come from?" he asked, though he was no longer sure he wanted to know the answer. His voice came out thin, strained. Yuan shrugged with the kind of casual nihilism that characterized so much of her response to horror. "Who knows? They tasted okay." The room tightened like a fist closing. Xiong went pale, his face taking on a greenish cast in the dim light. "What are you saying, old man?" His voice rose slightly, edged with something between fury and panic. The carpenter's reply was delivered with the kind of practical cruelty that quiets a room instantly, that makes people stop breathing. "I make coffins. Coffins hold the dead. Without the dead, what do you make coffins for?" It was like snapping a twig underfoot in a silent forest, something in everyone's composure splintered audibly. "The shrine's true purpose." The carpenter continued, and now his voice took on the quality of someone reciting an old story, one he'd heard so many times it had worn smooth like river stones. "The statue in the shrine isn't some benevolent deity. She's a hungry god. A local guardian who demands flesh as tribute. Each winter, for as long as anyone can remember, the village has offered her live livestock, pigs, goats, chickens. Blood and meat to keep her satisfied, to keep her from wandering." He paused, relighting his pipe with hands that didn't shake. Lin envied that steadiness. "This year," the carpenter continued, "when the animals were gone, when the plague or whatever you want to call it took them all, the villagers had to improvise. So they brought in outsiders. Coffin makers. People with the skills to build what she requires, to perform the proper rituals. People who wouldn't be missed. The implication hit like a physical blow. They weren't workers. They weren't guests. They were livestock. Acceptable substitutes for the animals that no longer existed. Horror spread outward through the room like spilled ink, staining everything it touched. People looked at each other differently now, not as fellow victims but as potential solutions to individual problems. If she's not fed, someone whispered from the back, and Lin couldn't identify what happens. The carpenter's answer was simple, final: she'll come for you herself. Coffin makers must placate her, that's the purpose, that's the contract. That's why this year it's you. The knife dancer. Huan Baijie had pulled out a small folding knife at some point during the conversation, Lin hadn't noticed when, and was now flicking it open and closed across her fingers with uncanny speed. The blade caught the light with each rotation, a little constellation of reflected brightness spinning through the gloom. It was a nervous habit, Lin had learned, but it didn't look nervous. It looked practiced, dangerous, like watching a snake coil before striking. The carpenter glanced at her more than once, and those glances carried weight. There was recognition in them, and something else, respect, maybe, or fear. The looks were mutual, one meeting his eyes each time with a sharp, measuring intensity that made Lin wonder what understanding existed between them that he wasn't privy to. What had been a group of people slowly solving a problem together, united by shared danger and common cause, dissolved into something colder: calculation. The atmosphere shifted from cooperation to competition, from "how do we survive" to "how do I survive?" Huan said sharply, with an impatient finality that cut through the murmuring, "Let's go." "Just go back?" Xiong asked, incredulous. His voice cracked slightly. "That's it? That's all we're doing? What else?" Huan answered, already moving toward the door. "Asking won't get more out of him. You've heard what you needed to hear. Be careful tonight." The warning. Lin followed her out into the too bright morning, his boots crunching on snow that had been packed down by dozens of footprints. How many of those people were still alive? He tried to press meaning from her words, tried to extract some kernel of wisdom or strategy. "You mean it might come after us again?" he asked, catching up to her. "The thing in the shrine." She stopped walking and leaned in close to his ear, close enough that he could smell the soap she'd used that morning, something herbal and incongruously pleasant. Her breath was warm against his skin when she spoke, low and almost conspiratorial. "Sometimes people are scarier than ghosts." That sentence landed differently than any supernatural threat could have. It wasn't a warning so much as an observation, the kind that makes the ground under your feet feel less like solid soil and more like treacherous ice, the kind that makes you realize the real danger isn't the monster in the dark but the person standing next to you with a knife and a will to live. The longest day. The day passed with agonizing slowness. The group's small civility, the please and thank yous, the shared meals, the casual conversations that had made this nightmare almost bearable, evaporated like morning frost under that thin sun. In corners, in hallways, in rooms with doors almost closed, whispered plans were hatched. Lin caught fragments as he moved through the house. "If we could just. Nobody would know. Better them than us." These were not plans to save everyone. These were calculations to ensure individual survival, cold equations where other people's lives were variables to be manipulated or eliminated. By dusk, the mood had soured into something that had a smell, not literally, but Lin could swear he could smell it anyway, acrid and wrong, like meat starting to turn. People muttered about coffins and wells, about dead things and timelines. "If one of us dies," someone said, Lin thought it might have been Chen Wei, but he couldn't be sure, "we can sew up the rest of this mess. Get it done, get the coffins made, get out." The words were not uttered with compassion or regret but with a bleak ledger's logic, the cold arithmetic of survival. 1 life for 6, 2 lives for security. The math was simple if you could bring yourself to do it. Lin tried not to accept the thought that people among them might actively orchestrate such deaths, might push someone downstairs, might tamper with food, might arrange an accident that left a body for the well. But the idea crawled in like a cold season's insect, persistent and unwelcome, burrowing into the spaces where his faith in humanity used to live. The scream at 2 a.m. As night fell properly, painting the world in shades of indigo and black, Lin found sleep unwilling to come despite his exhaustion. He lay in bed with eyes open, staring at ceiling beams he could barely see, while one slept soundly beside him. She seemed oblivious to the calculations amassing in the house like thunderclouds, to the way danger was shifting from external to internal, from ghost to human. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious. Maybe she just understood better than he did that worrying wouldn't change anything, that you either acted or you didn't, and that sleep was a resource worth hoarding. The house settled around him with its usual symphony of creaks and groans. Pipes ticked. Wind found gaps in the walls and whistled through them softly. Normal sounds. Almost comforting in their mundanity. At 2 in the morning, he'd been checking his watch obsessively, counting down the hours until dawn like a prisoner counting days, the silence shredded, a human scream, not high and uncanny like some spirit's wail, not the impossible sound of something that shouldn't exist. This was raw and visceral and terribly, recognizably human, the sound of flesh being undone, of someone understanding in real time that they were dying, that the world was ending for them specifically, right now, in the darkness. The scream cut off abruptly. End of chapter 8. To be continued.